Good evening and welcome. I'm Michael Usher. This is the latest from 7 News this Tuesday evening. More virus evacuations tonight, live to the quarantine centre on Christmas Island. A first look inside as some Australians are transferred to New Zealand. Queensland flood warnings will cross to Brisbane, the latest forecast on the deluge. Heartbreaking survival, more on one woman's incredible story of loss and hope as a bushfire expert calls for a radical overhaul of land management. What monkeys could tell us about the health hazards of inhaling bushfire smoke. Another celebrity chef faces accusations of underpaying staff at his flagship Melbourne restaurant. And what a circus. The winner is anyone's guess. The Democrat debacle in the US presidential race. As we go to air tonight, another evacuation mission from the coronavirus epicentre in Wuhan is underway, with dozens of Australians being flown to New Zealand. 240 citizens are already quarantined on Christmas Island. That's where we find our reporter Rob Scott, who's live for us now. Rob, good evening. They are spending their first full night there in that facility.
Yes, that's exactly right, Michael. Good evening. As you say, the first of the evacuees after a very long and tiring journey have arrived here on Christmas Island via Exmouth in WA's north, originally from Wuhan in China. They are bedding down as we speak, preparing to spend their first night in the detention centre, which has been decked out especially for their stay. It's been retrofitted for them. They'll be looked after around the clock by doctors, nurses, biosecurity staff, chefs. The goal here is to make sure that their stay is as safe and comfortable as can be over the next 2 weeks. We know that 243 Australians made the trip to Exmouth. 2 had to be offloaded there. A heavily pregnant woman and her partner. She was sent to Perth, not for any coronavirus fears, but more because she is so heavily pregnant she needs to be near a major hospital. The remaining 241 Australians are here on Christmas Island. Among them are 83 children and 5 babies, as I say, preparing to spend their first night in quarantine on this island.
Now, Rob, 7 News, we've spoken exclusively with 2 men among those evacuees on the island. Let's hear from Josh and Rob Nielsen now.
It's clean, well looked after, definitely.
It just feels like a very secured high school.
Looks like a cool place.
Yeah, the weather's beautiful.
Yeah, sunny, warm.
Making it sound like a holiday. They seem to be taking the experience in their stride. Rob, what happens next for these people?
Well, as I've said, they'll be here for the next 2 weeks, effectively seeing out their sentence, as it were, their 2 weeks of quarantine in the detention centre. But they're not just free to mingle with one another while they're in that centre. Doctors fear that if anyone comes down with the virus, it could quickly spread amongst all 241 of them. So what they've done is they've split them up into smaller family groups, hoping that if anyone does come down with the virus, that the threat of infecting others is minimised. And so after that 2 weeks, if no one comes down with the virus, they'll then be sent back to Australia. But of course, if someone does come down with the virus, those small family groups may be forced to start their quarantine period all over again. And tonight, we know about 50 more Australians are expected to leave Wuhan, not on a Qantas flight this time, but organised by the New Zealanders. It will first go to Auckland, and then those Australians, those 50 or so, will then be ferried here to Christmas Island. And we also know that Qantas is currently in talks through the federal government to get another flight into Wuhan to get the rest of the stranded Australians out of there as quickly as possible. Michael?
All righty. Rob Scott on Christmas Island. Thank you for that. Now, a flood warning's been issued for much of Queensland, with up to 200 millimetres of rain to fall in some parts of the state. Let's bring in Georgia Chumley, who's in Brisbane now. Georgia, good evening to you. Which area is going to be hardest hit?
Good evening, Michael. Well, the Sunshine Coast will cop the brunt of it tomorrow. 200 millimetres, perhaps even more is expected to fall there. And then the system will slowly move south, passing through Brisbane and down to the Gold Coast by Thursday. Now, Moreton Bay Regional Council, that's just north of Brisbane, has already begun sandbagging in case of flash flooding. And they've activated their emergency disaster warning team ahead of this huge deluge.
Now, fingers crossed, is it true that it could reach drought-affected areas?
It's pretty good news. Hopefully, they're expecting as much as 50 millimetres, even more, could reach drought-affected areas. It's not going to break the drought, but it could ease it. That's what forecasters are saying. Those areas have already received quite a large amount of rain recently. Some of them, obviously not everywhere, but in a lot of the areas, the ground is already wet. So that means that dams are ready to start filling up. So hopefully that 50 millimetres will go towards that. That's not the end of the wild weather we'll see, though. Into next week, there is a tropical low forming over Vanuatu. It's expected to move south towards southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales. Now, that could develop into a cyclone late next week. Even if it doesn't make shore or even come close to shore, we will experience some very large swells and potentially some beach erosion. So something to look towards to next week, Michael.
Well, if it gets to those drought-affected areas, it would answer a lot of prayers, Georgie, so let's hope for that. All right, Georgie Chumley in Brisbane tonight, thank you. Barnaby Joyce is not ruling out reclaiming his old job tonight, even after fellow Nats rebuffed a leadership challenge from the Maverick MP. Let's bring in political correspondent Tim Lester in Canberra now. Tim, good evening to you. Let's first take a look at what Barnaby Joyce told 7 News exclusively when asked whether he'd challenge again.
I'm not going to start saying, and if someone was struck by lightning, if someone was, fell out of a window, those circumstances are there for fate. No one's been run over by a bus. I don't intend for anybody to get run over by a bus.
All right, Tim, so will it take a bus to bring back Barnaby, or is prospects better than that?
Michael, long-term bus or no bus, Barnaby Joyce is likely to look to challenge again. His tone in that 7 News interview suggests he's read the mood in the National Party room, some of which is frankly embarrassment about the fact that there was a challenge on the same day that Parliament was paying respects to those most hurt by the bushfires. But he also likely polled pretty well today, depending on who you believe, somewhere between 6 and 10 votes in a party room of 21, so that would encourage him. There is also now just 3 former cabinet ministers, Barnaby Joyce, friend Matt Canavan, and of course Bridget McKenzie, sitting on the backbench, paid significantly less, a lot less to do, and likely bottling up a lot of ambition. The next election, scheduled at least, is still 2 years away. That is a lot of ambition to keep restrained right through until then. Something is going to give in the meantime, Michael.
All right, so state matters continue tomorrow, the first normal day of business for this parliamentary year. How's it looking for the government, Tim?
Not great, Michael. The Labor Party and independents are coming after the government over those sports rorts. That's the tens of millions that was pork-barreled to assist the coalition's campaign, according to the Auditor-General. As well, the Nationals' brawl seems to have only further opened a fracture within the coalition. Hundreds protested here today over climate, and moderate Liberals want a tougher, more ambitious approach from the government in terms of climate policy. Problem here is Nationals are now making protecting coal even more of a cause than they were before the leadership test. If you like, it's now a test for Michael McCormack as to whether he ought to keep his job. Barnaby Joyce and Matt Canavan particularly would leap on anything that they saw reducing protection of coal. This issue, of course, long a minefield for the coalition, but it is looking as dangerous as ever. Michael?
We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Tim Lester, thank you.
Thank you.
Tonight, 2 people have been questioned over the theft of a car linked to the murder of an Adelaide man. 43-year-old Matthew Scott Bristow was found on a footpath this morning with stab wounds to the chest. This afternoon, police located his car and arrested a man and a woman nearby. The woman at the centre of the Lawyer X scandal has begun giving evidence at the Royal Commission into the management of police informants. Nicola Gobbo told the inquiry she feared her double life would end up with her dead. She revealed her close links with gangland figure Tony Mockbell, including weekly dinners with his family. Gobbo's giving evidence via video link from a secret location. And some positive news following that horror Sydney crash which claimed the lives of 4 children. 2 young girls who were injured have now been discharged from hospital. We're told an 11-year-old boy's condition has also improved. The group was struck by an allegedly drunk driver, killing Anthony, Angelina and Sienna Abdullah, along with their cousin, Veronique Saker. Well, federal and state leaders have today paused to reflect on the bushfire disaster as those at the centre of Australia's Black Summer spoke out for the first time. I'm joined by reporter Serena Andaloro in Sydney. Serena, hello to you. Well, as we've just seen in that 7 News special before the latest, the trauma is still so very raw for so many.
Good evening, Michael. Extremely raw, and some of the most heartbreaking stories are only just coming to light. This evening, of course, we heard from Renee Salway, the wife of 29-year-old Patrick Salway, who died defending his property in Cobargo alongside his father. Now, she revealed they had left their little boy in Narooma, in safe territory, to try and keep him away from the fire. But at the last minute, she received a call to come and be with him, and that call, it spared her life.
It is quite extraordinary. Renee was so strong in that documentary. Let's hear what she told our reporter Denham Hitchcock.
You went back to Narooma at 4 a.m.
Yep.
because Harley was unsettled.
Yep.
You've thought about the implications of...
If I didn't go back? Yeah. Many mixed thoughts about that. Yeah. Because I wanted to be able to do something. I know I probably would have been hurt, but I wanted to help them.
Goodness me. It is heartbreaking. Serena, the bushfire crisis also very personal for some of our elected representatives who shared their stories today in Parliament. Take us through what happened.
Yeah, that's right, Michael. You might remember that remarkable vision of a fire crew only narrowly escaping hellfire near Nowra on New Year's Eve. Well, one of the men on board that truck is the son of New South Wales MP Trish Doyle. She today revealed she received a text message at the time saying, "Mum, I'm not sure we'll make it out alive." Now, there were also speeches at federal parliament, the Prime Minister calling the period Australia's Black Summer. He's written to all the state leaders, calling on them for support and advice ahead of the Royal Commission. All
right, Serena Andaloro in Sydney, thank you for that. Well, right now, the trial's beginning for the younger brother of the Manchester bomber. Hashim Abedi, now aged 22, is accused of helping to plot the suicide attack at a 2017 Ariana Grande concert. You might remember that killed 22 people. It injured many more, of course. He's charged with 22 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder, but maintains his innocence. Dozens of tourists remain stranded in New Zealand's Milford Sound tonight. Days of torrential rain, as you can see there, washed out the road and flooded most of the accommodation. Crews managed to get around 100 people today before the weather closed in, making flying far too dangerous. 2 South Island towns have been told to prepare for evacuation, with worsening conditions expected there tomorrow. Now, to the United States, where the first test in the 2020 presidential primary season has ended, well, in chaos and a lot of confusion. Technology failures mean there's still no result from the Democrats' Iowa caucus. Let's bring in our US Bureau Chief, Ashley Mullaney, live in Iowa for us tonight. Ash, good evening to you. Fair to say, bizarre scenes, no clear winner. That did not, however, stop several of the candidates from claiming victory. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. This is not the way that this night was supposed to go. There was so much hype around the Iowa caucus today, but this has not gone to plan. It appears that there has been a major technology failure here tonight and quite an embarrassment for the Democrats. We have still seen some of these candidates, though, claiming victory tonight without any results.
Let's have a listen to what some of them said.
We're going to walk out of here with our share of delegates. We don't know exactly what it is yet, but we feel good about where we are.
By all indications, we are going on to New Hampshire victorious.
Somehow, some way, I'm going to get on a plane tonight to New Hampshire.
A strong feeling that at some point the results will be announced.
Well, they all won and they're all moving on. So, Ashley, when are we actually going to get a result? When's that likely?
Well, the party's saying later today, Michael, so still hours from now, but there's a sense that the damage is already done here. These candidates spent months campaigning, millions of dollars to try and win over voters. This really was a crucial race for them. So there's a very real sense of disappointment here tonight. And we've already seen Joe Biden fire off a legal letter to the party saying or complaining about the process and of course, disappointment from Iowans too. They take their civic duty really seriously, and they all turned out tonight to caucus, so not the result we were expecting, no result in fact.
Well, as we heard from the candidates, they're moving on to the next race now, but how pivotal will the results from this Iowa vote be when they're finally known?
Yeah, many of them have already taken off from Iowa tonight, headed to New Hampshire, where they'll have their next vote next week. Iowa is really crucial in this race. It was supposed to give at least one of these candidates a boost going into the next primary election, and considered a really important vote, both for momentum and for money, and that just hasn't happened tonight. So we can only rely on what we've seen anecdotally, and we've seen a lot of support, a huge turnout tonight for Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, and a bit of concern about the Biden campaign tonight.
It's all pretty good news, isn't it, Ash? For Donald Trump, he must be revelling in this.
Oh, he'd be relishing this tonight, Michael. He's already taken to Twitter and said that this is a big win for him in Iowa, and in some ways it is. He really is the only candidate that's had a victory here tonight with none of the others, and his campaign team is already tweeting that this process is rigged, and that's the problem. Even when we get the results later today, there will be this cloud of doubt over what has happened here tonight.
Ash, just before I let you go, remind me again, how long is this presidential campaign?
Well, we've got to wait until November. We
Right.
still have months to go. It feels like it's been going a long time already, and that's why I think there was just such a sense of disappointment here tonight, because there was so much hype about Iowa, and we were finally going to get a sense of where this was going, because it was such a huge field of Democrats that finally we might have some names that look like serious contenders. But no, we've got a long way to go. It's a marathon, Mush.
Well, it's about 4 o'clock in the morning where you are now. You've got a long few months ahead of you. We look forward to talking to you along the whole campaign. Ash Mullaney in America, thank you. Still to come. What needs to happen next to prevent a repeat of this summer's bushfire devastation? Botanist and bushfire expert Peter Attewell joins me. A groundbreaking study, the effects of bushfire smoke on monkeys years after exposure, the research that could hold vital clues to our future health. The latest celebrity chef caught up in an underpayment scandal, Heston Blumenthal's Melbourne restaurant under fire, accused of stealing from its workers, and the story behind this powerful image. It's fantastic. We'll introduce you to Frankie. It's all coming up next on the latest from 7 News. Well, as we know all too well, this summer Australia has suffered through some of the worst bushfire conditions ever experienced, and experts say it should be a clear message to politicians that current land management practices are just not working. I'm joined by the Professor of Botany and Bushfire, expert Peter Attewell. Peter, thank you so much for joining the latest this evening. You've been studying bushfires for 60 years. Has land management of these bushfire-affected areas failed, in your opinion?
Look, I think it has failed. I think it has failed. There's been a steady decline in the number of forestry-trained people actually working in the country, working in the bush. Much of the bush has been allowed to look after itself in a way. We've managed by keeping fire out. And the result of that has been an accumulation of fuels. We've been relying on excessive expenditure in water bombers and water tankers to put fires out without paying enough attention to the fuel loads on the ground. So I think there has to be a very big change in fuel management, and that can only be done by linking fuel management in with forest management. The two are integrated, and it must be done by trained professional people.
And who best knows that, Peter, do you think? Who's best put in charge of managing the land in local areas?
Look, I think we have to pay far more attention to local people, local knowledge, local expertise. Local communities are essential in management. Perhaps through some sort of people's forum, which has full control over fuel reduction. People on the ground, local people who know the land, who know the fuels, and who are able to participate in fuel reduction burning. I think we've got to change the way in which we manage our forest completely.
So if we hand back control to more local authorities and local knowledge, who needs to give up that power or control? Who are the people not making the right decisions at the moment?
I think we're giving way to government ideologies. I think we're giving way to ecological ideologies, and really, the people who have to make these decisions should be professional people, highly trained people, both in forest management and fire management. I think governments are taking too many decisions in the way our forests should be managed.
Do Do you have any faith or confidence that those processes will change in time for the next bushfire season? Because it looks like the conditions are going to be identical again.
Yes, I think they must change. I think they must change. The only thing we can do in the face of changing climate, and I firmly believe in changing climate and we're the cause of it, the only thing we can do is to manage the fuels. Otherwise, we're in for more mega fires. I'd just like to say that I was co-chair of a major international workshop in Florida about 8 years ago. People from all around the globe, 100 people, all fire experts. And if I may read a conclusion that I wrote for the editorial for that conference, this conclusion says, megafires are the inevitable result of a perfect storm of coinciding trends of warmer climate, more frequent droughts, and substantially increasing fuel loads. And how prophetic was that in relation to the fires we've just had? We've had exactly those conditions.
Sadly, you were spot on with that, Peter. Thank you for reading that as well, and thank you very much for joining the latest this evening.
That's a great pleasure.
A new US study has given scientists an insight into the long-term impact of bushfire smoke on health. Researchers followed monkeys in captivity in Northern California for over a decade throughout several devastating wildfire seasons. Findings showed that those exposed to smoke had 20% less lung capacity and fought infection less effectively. It also found that they could pass all those traits to their offspring.
A lot of the times, things that affect monkeys also can affect humans in similar ways. So we have some evidence in the non-human primate studies, the monkeys, showing that there are short-term and long-term effects from being exposed to wildfires, especially as youth. So now we're looking in the human population to see if those same results are replicated.
Now, I've just received some breaking news. Another Australian case of coronavirus has been confirmed. We're being told an 8-year-old boy in Queensland is stable and under observation on the Gold Coast. A Chinese national from Wuhan, he was a member of a tour group touring that state. Queensland police said tonight hunting for a gang they suspect was responsible for a string of jewellery store robberies. The thieves were caught on camera during a recent theft in Caloundra, kicking and climbing on cabinets, even pulling out a gun in an attempt to shoot open a case. It's one of 14 recent robberies in that region since October. In a world first, the Royal Melbourne Hospital is trialling a simple wipe, usually used by police to determine if violent patients are under the influence of drugs. So far, 40% have tested positive. Almost all of them were on ice. Staff say using the test gives them certainty about what they're dealing with. And there are calls to make the wipes a permanent fixture statewide. And hundreds of jobs are in doubt tonight, with retailer Colette by Colette Heyman going into voluntary administration. The accessories store employs 300 staff in 140 locations across Australia. Of course, the chain's demise is just the latest in a series of retail collapses in recent months. We're told the stores will continue to trade while administrators look for a buyer. A leaked report has added Heston Blumenthal to the growing list of celebrity chefs underpaying workers accused of cheating staff out of $4.5 million. Our Network Finance editor Gemma Acton joins me now. Gem, good evening to you. First, let's take a listen to what some of those affected workers had to say.
I'm owed around $20,000 to $25,000.
So like 15-hour days, only like half an hour break. Sometimes finish around like 1:30 in the morning. Next day we come at 7 in the morning.
Well, Gemma, Melbourne's Crown Casino, that's where the restaurant is. That's been dragged into the scandal now. How has it responded?
Well, Michael, Crown is unsurprisingly doing its best to distance itself from the situation. It's saying the restaurant was a tenant like any other and therefore responsible for managing its own operations. But we know that this is something of a stretch. For example, the restaurant was only paying a token $1 a year rent. And we understand from the liquidators, they're claiming that it was actually a Crown employee who drew up the original blueprint for the staff contracts that were used in the subsequent years and resulted in years and years of underpayment. And that's why you're hearing calls for Crown to step in and help these workers, many of whom, as we just heard, have been underpaid by thousands and thousands of dollars, and others who are facing a very uncertain future now that the restaurant's in the hands of liquidators.
So $4.5 million here. How does that compare to other recent wage theft cases?
Yeah, well, dinner just joins a long list of hospitality businesses who have been involved in these recent wage scandals. Two really high-profile cases with other celebrity chefs, Neil Perry and George Columbaris, looking at around $10 million and $8 million in those cases. Now, the difference is that as soon as they were exposed, they swiftly repaid the outstanding monies, whereas in this situation, the staff at Dinner by Heston have not been so lucky at all. And while we see this issue as really pervasive across the hospitality industry in a really disturbing and worrying way, it's by far from the only industry guilty of this. We've seen it in franchising, in farming, in retailing, and of course famously in supermarkets, where we saw the Woolworths chief executive Brad Banducci opt to forego his $2.6 million bonus when a wage scandal came out at Woolworths. And so what we are seeing in a slightly positive light is companies becoming so aware of the risk to their reputations, they're making more of an effort to go back, check their books and self-report in some cases.
So very briefly, I know this is too much to get into and we're running out of time, but in the cases that have been found already, are they finding that these employers are doing it deliberately, or are their practices just so loose and slack that this is all slipping through the system?
Well, unfortunately, it's so pervasive across the industry that it's a problem with the whole structure of the industry, and you can understand that there are business competitive advantages for businesses that are underpaying their staff compared to other ones, so it's very difficult to compete if someone isn't paying their staff fairly. So it's certainly a pervasive issue that needs to be addressed at an industry-wide level.
And it is. They're
it
investigating more. All right, Gemma, good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Well, still to come on the latest from 7 News, your full weather forecast for Wednesday and tonight's final frame. Back in a minute. Welcome back. We're taking a look over the Brisbane skyline tonight. A live shot there with heavy rain and flash flooding warnings in place we told you about earlier in the show, and that is forecast for large parts of southeast Queensland tomorrow. Taking a look at the temps around the country, partly cloudy and 30 for Canberra, 28 and sunny in Adelaide. Darwin, 33 with a shower or two and possible storms. And in some other parts, heavy falls expected in Maroochydore, the top of 26. Warrnambool, cloudy and 20, 24 and mostly sunny for Port Lincoln, 34 for Bunbury. Now, in a summer that's been ravaged by bushfire and drought, sometimes we all need a little hope, and our final frame tonight provides just that. Lindy Hick from Queensland took this spectacular shot of her daughter Frankie running toward an oncoming storm in Hewenden. It's just been named the winner of the Land newspaper's Stories of Hope photography competition. The caption on the photo, quote, "We can't always choose the music life plays for us, but we can choose how we dance to it." That is a wonderful sentiment, which is why it is tonight's final frame. Good shot. Thank you for your company this evening. If you'd like to rewatch any part of tonight's show, you can catch it again on 7+. Sunrise back first thing tomorrow morning from 5:30 as always, and don't miss the latest on Facebook Watch every weekday afternoon. For now, though, from the team here at 7 News, that is the latest. I'm Michael Usher. Have a great night.